about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, here to Liberty Talk Radio. I'm Joe Cristiano. Today, folks, I'd like to talk about the universal basic income. Now, a few days ago, I did a little dissertation on it and expressed my reservations about the entire program, but I just couldn't get it out of my head how bad this program is, how un-American it is, and how people seem to be embracing it and considering a very generous gift by our government and our benevolent government that really cares about the people and people like myself who want to see people succeed on their own. I'm no good, I'm rotten, and I'm the person you want to avoid. And I could not stop thinking about this subject, so I'm going to do a second program on it. History has absolutely no record of any country, and I'm going back prior to Greece, Egyptian times, no record of any country surviving that has reallocated productive money to unproductive people. And neither is there any history of any civilization being uplifted as a result of government interference in the free marketplace. Now, back a couple thousand, 3,000 years ago, there was no such thing as a free marketplace, but you know what I mean, where people were left to their own devices. They did pretty well. When the government got involved, things seemed to take a different turn, and more restrictions were placed on society, on the people, on businesses and whatever, and it was usually resulted in the demise of the economy. And it's happened every time. Now, we only have about 8,000 years of history, but I know that's not enough for some people. But it absolutely disturbs me beyond imagination that we have elected officials who actually swear to obey the Constitution and yet would even give universal basic income a thought. You'd think they would say, no, that's unconstitutional. The government doesn't exist to redistribute income. It's for us to protect the freedom and the rights of the people so they can make that choice for themselves. They will be free to do whatever they want to do, provided they do not infringe upon the equal rights of others. A very simple concept. But in most countries around the world, there is some sort of income that comes in from the government. Now, we have it. Obviously, we have welfare programs, we have healthcare programs and whatever. So we are trotting down that road to socialism and communism, whatever you want to call it, but we are getting away from the free market. And what's interesting is that the further down this road we go, the poorer we are becoming as a nation. But when I say poor, I don't even mean poor financially, but poor spiritually and by our own intuition, what we should do to become successful. It seems like we're destroying the very fabric of the society. And you don't hear many people talk about, the free market. Now, when these clowns run for office, they don't talk about, very rarely talk about the Constitution. They very rarely talk about the Bill of Rights. They very rarely talk about how freedom is our most important asset, and freedom breeds a prosperous economy. No, it's always, when the government program kicks in, it'll make things better. They're always promising something for nothing. And of course, people looking for some help will vote that way. But they very rarely talk about the free economy. They very rarely talk about the Bill of Rights. They very rarely, if ever, talk about the Constitution. Now, they swear to it, and then they violate every aspect of it. And I'm talking Republicans and Democrats. They just take sides. They split up the pie, and they say, we'll say yes to this part. You say yes to that part. We'll argue. We'll make people think that we're adversaries and all this, but we'll both get our way eventually and screw everybody. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about the basic income. Some of the questions I had. I talked last time about TED Talk and how this fella got in on there. He tried to convince everyone how great this thing was. And he talked about a woman in India, blah, 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 blah. And all this other stuff about, if it wasn't for the government giving her money to buy a sewing machine, she wouldn't have her own business. And we should be doing the same here. Boy, comparing a woman living in the outlands of India, where there's no money, there's no industry, there's nothing, there's no rights, nothing at all, and comparing it to the United States is a real gap there, so we can't compare both of them. But I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the parts of the program that I think should be answered or we should think about, all right? You ever notice the parents who give their give their children about everything that they want? They don't make them earn it. They don't have, they're not as successful. Those parents who know better, they say, Johnny, if you want this, you have to figure out a way to get it. And one way to do it is to earn some money, and you have to think out, what is it you like to do to earn money that you can buy that? In other words, they encourage people to become entrepreneurs at a very, very young age, rather than saying, here, Johnny, here's the money, go out and play, or go out and buy whatever you want. These children usually have a much more difficult time later in life. And it's universal. Doesn't have the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean are not places where this principle stops. Now, I want to talk. I had so many points. I had to write some of them down. First of all, where does this money come from? Let's assume for a second that there's about 325 million people in the United States. Let's assume just 10% are eligible for this program. You're talking somewhere around $25 billion a year, or $32 billion a year that the government give out. Where does the money come from? We are broke. If we added all of our debts, we're in debt to close to $1 quadrillion. I'm talking about the debt of the entire nation. If you just take direct government debt, you're talking about somewhere in the vicinity of well over $100 trillion. Where's the money going to come from when we are already bankrupt? You think giving money out is going to increase our GDP, is going to increase the wealth of the nation? No, it'll put us further in the hole. We have no place from which we can get this money. We are now, as I speak, are printing in billions upon billions of dollars and putting into the economy, trying to avoid an entire economic collapse through our banking system. And so now we're going to introduce something which is going to give $1 trillion extra out to people who are not producing anything? I mean, do we have a problem with that? Can we not think of that at all? And by the way, they talked about possibly $1,000. How did they arrive at that? Where did the $1,000 come from? Did they do some empirical analysis? Did they say, well, this is what we can afford? This is what the people need? And then how do they decide who gets the $1,000 a month? Oh, you can say, well, you have to be a certain age and unemployed. And what about drug dealers? Drug dealers are unemployed according to the government, right? But they're making good money on the street. We'll be giving them $1,000 a month. They'll have a whole cartel for themselves. Is this the way we want to treat America? Is that we want to start giving money to people who are dealing in illegal activities? Hey, you can't exclude them because you cannot identify them. And what qualifies one for the money? They say, well, so far they're hazy. They say, well, you have to be an adult or a certain age. You have to graduate high school, and all these other things. But whether or not you have a job or don't have a job, you get $1,000. Well, now, once a person gets accustomed to the $1,000 a month, and let's assume for a second there's inflation, which there always is in this country. And the way government is printing money, the US dollar is becoming more and more worthless. In other words, it's buying less and less for the same buck. So what happens after a few months, a year or so, where that $1,000 that they're accustomed to in buying these items or food or whatever, all of a sudden is not enough? Well, they're going to go to the government and say, hey, you're underpaying us. You created the inflation, and you're still paying me $1,000. I need really $1,025. I need $1,050. I need $1,100. Whatever the magic number is in their own mind. And then the person running for office will say, I think everyone should get $1,500 a month, not $1,000. And we ratchet this up and ratchet this up. And they say, well, we'll tax the poor, the rich. The rich can go wherever they want. I mean, the rich are the only ones really paying taxes. In fact, everyone else actually gets a tax refund in one way, shape, or form for what they're paying and for the services that they receive. The rich are the only ones truly paying taxes. Now, if I was a uber wealthy person, and all of a sudden I was going to get hit with phenomenal taxes, hey, I'd move to South America, I'd move to Puerto Rico, I'd move to any place else, I'd move to Canada. Right? Don't have to pay the tax anymore. I'm no longer a U.S. citizen. I'm a citizen of another country. So you lose all your wealthy people and spare me, the wealthy people are selfish. They keep all the money. They don't care. No, the wealthy people are our productive people for the most part. Are there lousy, rotten, cheap people that are wealthy that wouldn't give you a dime if you were dying, there's starving to death? Yeah, there are, but for the most part, most of the wealthy people I know are incredibly generous, a lot more generous than people who are sort of struggling. Well, they can't give, and they won't give. And once they make money, they hold on to their money just as well as everyone else does. So you have this internal fight between who has the money, who gives the money, who decides who gives the money, and how much. Well, there are no answers to those questions. So having a basic universal income will in fact destroy the United States. Let's see. Oh yeah, I came up with this thing. It would be, if there's 325 million people in the United States, and only 10% receive the universal basic income, that equates to $32 billion per year. $32 billion per year. That's not right either. I think it's... and when they say, I just got a note from my assistant here, and they said universal means everyone. They say universal income, but yet they say, oh no, these are the only people eligible for it. Well, wait a minute. They shouldn't call it universal. When you say universal, it sounds nice, but it doesn't work very well. Anyway, if you have 325 million people and 10% of that, right, and if 10% receive the universal basic income, that equates to $32 billion a year. And I think that math is wrong, by the way. It's much more than that. Who's donating this money? I have to read my notes because there's so many points I wanted to make. Government officials that are proponents of the universal basic income said that it would save money in the long run and improve productivity. In what planet do you give people money for nothing and they become more productive? Now, there are instances, and there are plenty of them, where people are so down and out, if you give them just a little bit of money once, they'll make good use of that money and become productive. I agree with that. But once you put them on a program, ball game is over. Once enacted, our elected officials would be required to admit that they lied when they committed to obey the Constitution. Would there not be so? I'm writing my notes because there's so many points I wanted to make, I could not memorize them. And how is government going to control, the outflow of this money? Well, now you have to create an entire department that does nothing but control the outflow of money. And I tell you, the people I trust the least are the people in government. And who knows how they will distribute that money? God only knows. And I'll tell you one thing, it will not be fair, and it will not go to the right people, and they will make a fortune doing it. And when inflation ramps up, what are you going to do? What is the government going to do when inflation? Everything becomes more and more expensive. What is the government going to say? Well, it's had to be someone's fault. Let's blame General Motors. Let's blame somebody. But they never blame themselves. If this is being proposed because of fear of job losses due to automation, why didn't the government enact this program after the invention of the wheel? Think about that. I mean, there have been innovations in manufacturing, in building, in industry. For thousands of years, we have progressed, and every time we did, we incorporated labor-saving devices. The automobile was a labor-saving device and opened more industries. If we have the internet now and we have labor-saving devices and we've created more jobs, people who program the the systems and whatever. And this is a whole new industry that hires millions of people directly and indirectly. And yet, it saves us a lot of time doing things. A lot of times we can just order things over the phone, on the internet, and have it delivered to our door. Well, now it's being delivered to our door. We've just hired a guy to drive a truck to drop the goods to the person directly. So this is a misleading comment when they say, well, jobs are being taken away from us. And if you have a job that is an antiquated job, been around for dozens of years, and it's being automated, you better learn. Where are the parents today with their children? Why aren't they saying, Johnny, if you go to school and you just learn what is being taught in school, and you graduate, most likely you will not be able to find a job. Because there are people with college educations who are still relatively illiterate, have no skills. If you want to survive in this nation, you have to get a skill, develop a skill. So then at least the parents become responsible for their children. And if a parent doesn't want to be responsible, don't have children. That's where the key is. If you're going to be an irresponsible parent and then pawn your kids off to the school system, to the government, so that they can guarantee them a job, I'll have all the kids in the world, I don't have to worry about it. Not my problem. Well, it is your problem. It always has been your problem and always will be your problem. But don't transfer that problem to me, tax me to pay other people not to work. I mean, this is such an insane idea. And what really bothers me, it's contrary to the spirit of America. America was meant to be land of the free, home of the brave. I mean, we came here. The people who came here, they came here on a boat. They landed here. They didn't have any money. And if they had money, there was no one to give it to. They had to find a way, to survive. And folks, although we're a more mature company now, things haven't changed. When you're born into this world, you're born into this world to learn to survive. Every one of us has learned to survive. When I lost my job, I had to learn to survive. I had to start a company. And let me tell you something, I was scared. And I went through years of just literally suffering to find out whether or not I was going to be in business the next day. And I finally pulled out of it. But everyone's got to go through that. And once you go through that, you have a sense of self-satisfaction, a sense of net worth, a sense of freedom. But once you rely on the government, you don't have that desire anymore. And of course, at the same time, you have lost all of your freedom. Universal basic income is probably the worst program that I have ever heard come out of the mouths of our elected officials. And I really wish people would take responsibility for themselves. That's the key. I wish parents would take responsibility for their children at a young age. And I wish family would take care of family. Neighbors would take care of neighbors. We don't need government. It was never intended for government to take care of us. If we could only go forward, I should say, to a time that was more civilized, where people worked hard in order to survive. They didn't go to anyone else. They didn't say, geez, I'm out of a job. Can you feed me? They found a way to do it. If they had college-educated people hit the streets during the Depression of 1929, people made do. I saw one where a person actually was trying to find wood in the park, pieces of wood in the park, so they can put it in their stove so they can cook. People became very ingenious, and I wish we would do that today. But today, we just sit there and say, well, I can't do this. I can apply for this program. Well, all basic universal income will do will make us more dependent on government, less free. Now, I would like to hear from you. My email is comments@libertytalkradio.com. And if I'm wrong, if you think I'm wrong, I don't mind hearing from you. I won't be angry or anything like that. And maybe what I should do is, if I get enough, I'll put on a whole show that will just answer the questions on the air. Okay? And for this, I want to thank you very much for listening in. And I really wish you would give this some thought. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to think independently. Don't be afraid to, when you watch television and you hear these I want to say comedians, but they are comedians in a way, elected officials, and they sound so educated and so sure of themselves and so intelligent. They're not. They don't know what they're talking about because they've never read the Constitution. And that includes our friend Donald Trump. He has no concept of what is going on. He changes his mind 3 times a day in 3 different directions. So we can't rely on them. We have to rely on ourselves. We have to rely on our skills, and we have to rely on our family. And this is the only way America will once again become great again. Okay, thank you very much for listening in.